In this video, we'll be showing you how to add a user to the Sentry VMS database. First, let's log into the Sentry VMS client. Then we'll select Administration, followed by Setup and Configuration. On the server configuration window that you see right here, this allows you to gain access to all of the configuration and parameter settings you'll need for the particular server. In this case, we want User Manager in the left-hand menu because we'll be adding a user. So we click on User Manager, and then on the right-hand side, we'll click on the Add button. So what you're looking at now is the Add New User window. This gives us the ability to add a new user by giving them a username, a password, and by giving them permissions to cameras, facility maps, layouts, and the rules that are presently in the Sentry VMS database. So let's add a new user. This user's name is going to be test user. Their full name is test user. Their email address, which is an optional field, would be testuser@ipvideocorp.com. Password is going to be test user, and we need to verify that again. Now we have a checkbox here that says user is administrator. Only check that box off if you indeed want this user to have administrative privileges. A user with administrative privileges has the ability to change other parameters within the Sentry VMS system. That includes adding and removing servers, changing camera parameters, adding and deleting cameras, and so on. So be very selective, be very careful, and limit the number of people who are administrators on a given system. If this is being set up for an end user, for example, most likely they will not require administrator privileges in order to do their job function. So let's move on to groups. And as you can see, we have 3 groups available here: the user group, quality assurance, and the administrations group. So since this is a standard user, let's just add them to the user group. Moving on to camera permissions. Here we have a list of all the cameras available on our system. So what we'd like to do is select a couple of these cameras for this user to be able to view and interact with. So let's pick all the IP Video Corporation cameras. So what this checkbox is telling us is that for these cameras and this user, they will be able to access the live view of those cameras. We also want them to be able to view recorded video, so we'll check those off as well. And you can mix and match any of the cameras that are in this list. You can also select PTZ if these are PTZ cameras and you want them to gain access to any of the PTZ controls. But as you can see, I am unable to check these boxes off in the PTZ column because these are not PTZ cameras. However, if we go down here, sliding down the list of camera names a little bit, and I select these cameras, which by the very name says PTZ, I can now check off that box. So if you're unable to check off a PTZ box, you have to assume at this point that it is not a recognized PTZ camera. However, all PTZ cameras that are recognized by the system will give you the option to check off that box, as you see right here. And then there's 2 other columns for being able to hear audio for these cameras if they're set up for audio capability, and whether or not you can export a clip of video from one or more of these cameras. So I'm going to check off those boxes for the ability to export a clip. Moving to the next tab, let's go to Facility Maps. Now this particular user, I want them to have the ability to see all maps related to the facility they're at. So I'll click on All Maps and populate all those checkboxes. If I didn't want that, let's say I just wanted them to view the exterior, for example, of the building, that's the only checkbox that matters. But in this case, let's check all maps. In the Layouts tab, we have the same situation. There are a bunch of layouts we have here. Let me slide this over just a little bit. We have a bunch of layouts here, and depending on which ones I want this user to have, will be the ones that I check off. So we can have that, for example, sample layout, parking lot layout, and a few others. If I wanted to have all the layouts selected for that user, I would click on the All Layouts button and all those checkboxes would populate. Okay, and then the last one is rules. These are the current rules that are entered into the rules engine in the Sentry VMS database. Now, since this user is a standard user and I don't want this user to be interacting with these rules, I will leave all of these checkboxes blank. But the same rule, quote unquote, applies to this as it does for all the other tabs. You can individually check these boxes off or select all rules if you want this user to interact with these rules in the VMS database. So now that we've reached the last tab, let's click on Add. All right? Now if we scroll down here we have our test user. All right? Our test user has all the information that we've seen before, populated these pieces of information. It's in the user group. It has these checked marked cameras as permissioned cameras. It has access to all the facility maps, has access to some of the layouts, and has no access to rules. So let's click Apply. Let's click OK. Now what we're going to do is log in as this user and see what comes up in the client. So we'll log in as test user. We have access to Sentry VMS. What I'm going to do on the left side is open up the navigation tree. And as you can see, we have a limited number of cameras here. These are all the cameras that were selected when we set the user up originally. That goes for facility maps. You can see I have access to all 4 facility maps. It also applies to layouts. We have many more layouts in our system than what you see here. The reason why these are limited is because I only checked off the boxes for these layouts. So you can custom tailor any user to be able to see all the way down from 1 camera all the way up to all the cameras within the system and everything in between. So each individual user will have their own unique view of cameras, layouts, facility maps, and so on within the system. And that's how you add a user to the Sentry VMS database.